Over the past few years, the homosexual community has been prejudiced by means of degrading and neglecting them from our society's standards. When we go around our school, we see people showing their lack of compassion to those who are born to be someone that most people are afraid to be. So I ask myself, and to people around me, how often do we hear homophobic remarks in our community?
In class, I don't allow it. I catch it infrequently, and when I do, I call them on it.
I think I hear them pretty often, usually during class.
And I tell them it's inappropriate. I tend to hear it quite frequently outside of class. And even there, if I hear it, I act on it.
But most of the time I hear them in the hallways when I'm walking down the halls and people say stuff like you're a fag or that's so gay, which is really offensive.
The school that I went to and the community that I lived in was a much smaller community in rural Canada. So I found that there was a lot more of a narrow-minded attitude towards people with different backgrounds, people with different identities and associations about gender. So I think that there's a lot of homophobic comments and a lot of homophobia in general.
I hear some people, say sometimes the teacher's not listening, but sometimes they are, and they don't really say anything to stop them. So I kind of feel really bad when the adults aren't even doing anything.
I've been teaching for 6 or 7 years now, and at the beginning of my teaching career, it was very common. It was probably the slang of choice to say something is gay.
And they say it just to replace as a replacement word for oh, that's not cool.
It's part of their vocabulary now. Teachers, we almost get numbed because we hear it so often.
In high school especially, there's a lot of homophobic remarks in the hallways, in classes, and when I was at David Thompson, there was a big thing with the phrase "that's so gay," and you would hear that almost every lunch hour 2 or 3 times.
Because I'm pretty attuned to that, and I tell my students at the beginning of the year that I have no tolerance for anti-homophobia, and I give them examples of the things that I find unacceptable in my room.
Okay, and how would they feel if one of their classmates is homosexual? How would they feel about that, right? It'd probably make them feel pretty nervous about showing their, coming out one day or showing their true being. Because people treat the word gay like it's a swear word almost.
In 2007, at David Thompson Secondary Public High School, a grade 11 student was forced to drop out of school due to heavy amount of harassment and bullying that was done towards him.
That was a couple years ago, 2 years ago, and it was my first year in counseling. And one of the kids whom I knew was gay, because he was openly gay.
I know personally, and I used to work with him, and he's a wonderful guy.
Got harassed at school for being gay. And he came to me a couple times and we talked about it.
I talk with him often, and when he tells me about his experience at David Thompson being a very hostile environment, that's not something that I felt particularly good about.
And one of the things he would never do is he would never tell me who it was. And administrators and counselors and any other adult needs to know who the person is who's doing it. You can't take action against a non-existent hatred.
Because I know that as a member of the David Thompson School, that it's my responsibility to help make that a good environment for other people.
But I think a kid who's being harassed needs more direct involvement. You need to tell me who. And as much as I tried to convince him to tell me who, he refused to. He insisted that it would just get worse, then they would, I don't know if it could get any worse. They were giving him a really hard time. He ended up dropping out of school because of it.
I am participating in the act of creating the environment for other students. And I can either choose to make that a welcoming environment or a hostile environment.
He had his own share of struggles. He had a hard time with school as it was, and he didn't need this additional burden or challenge.
For him to see that as hostile, to the point where he left David Thompson before graduating, and because he felt that was the best option for him, was heartbreaking for me, because I love this guy to death. He's a wonderful guy, and it's not something I want to see for him or any of my friends.
But he stuck with it as long as he could. His mom knew he was gay. She was very supportive of him. Miss Brader knew about it. She was supportive of him. But the fact that he wouldn't tell us anybody's name didn't allow us to do a whole lot other than to be there to support him and let him know that when he was ready to give us some info, that we would take action.
When you think about it, 10% of the population is gay, and 15 or 20 years down the line, when I have kids, or anybody else my age is going to be having kids, it's luck. It's pretty much luck of the draw. Your kid has that 10% chance to be gay, and I don't want my kid to be growing up in that kind of hostile environment, whether he is or isn't. It's not an environment I want anybody to grow up in.
So he did this. He went through all the paperwork, got all signed out through his classes, and he went to Miss Brader's office with myself and his mom and signed all the forms. And Miss Brader tried to be supportive again. He wouldn't give any names. He came back afterwards when we were finished that interview and he'd signed off all the papers. He came back and sat with me because I was supposed to get the other forms filled out for teachers to sign. And when we're doing this, I'm saying, look, why don't you tell me now? You're leaving. You're probably not going to see these kids again. And so he agreed to tell me who they were. And we basically got out the annual and went through, and he started to identify kids. And there was I think it was about 28 kids. And there was only one girl and all the rest were boys that were harassing him. That's Thompson. I mean, we are a good school, and we have really good kids. And if that can happen here, terrorize a kid to the point of, giving up on his dreams, his hopes, his life, education is so core. He did so well at school, considering the challenges he had. I hope he goes back. Haven't heard from him since.
That's a very difficult question, because that question supposes that a minority would be, would be sort of responsible for alienating a majority, which has happened. I mean, we have historical cases of that.
I think that we wouldn't be any better off. If anything, we'd probably be worse off.
I mean, for example, the course of history would change completely. I mean, even going back to ancient times, homosexuality was pretty taboo.
It would certainly make things interesting. I don't know. I don't think it would lead to the erasure of intolerance.
It would make a difference if the world had changed its standards.
The 90% that aren't gay would be insulted and put down and discriminated against, instead of the 10% that we have now.
Like, for example, on TV, you're probably seeing more of man kissing other men or girls kissing other girls, and people would be kind of freaked out if, we have a mom and a dad instead of two moms or two dads, which we think is pretty weird.
In terms of switching the roles around, it's not the fact that, people are gay or people are not straight, but it's the fact that people are different.
That's a personal battle that every individual has to work through. I think it's part of our human nature to have moments of intolerance. And it is our obligation to constantly fight against that.
But the good news is, from my experience, homophobia has decreased and the awareness increased dramatically. Here at our school, David Thompson Secondary, there is a club dedicated to challenging homophobia called CHAT. And every year, we do fundraising activities, go to different classrooms to teach the aspect within sexual orientations, all just to help defeat homophobia in our school. So the question is, how much has it changed in our school?
I've been out for about 20 years. So when I first came out, I know one time when I was living downtown, this is about maybe 15 years ago, 17, something like that. And I remember going over to Robson Street, so I lived in the West End, just down there. And I went over to London Drugs at about 8:30 in the evening, and don't know what I went over to get something. And I'm walking back, and as I'm walking back, there are these two guys on the other side of the street walking towards me.
I think acceptance and tolerance for people who are outside of the quote mainstream, whether you're talking about LGBT people or just people in general, minorities, it's increased dramatically.
And as I get closer to them, they walk across to my side of the street. And I could sort of tell that they might have had a bit to drink, because they were carrying on, being a bit loud. And as I got toward them, I thought, okay, I better be careful here, because maybe they crossed over and thought they might want to beat me up.
I think that as students mature and they become more aware of the world around them, they sort of tend to realize that it's not cool to make, comments that degrade other people.
As we got closer, I didn't look at them, because I think probably one of the worst things you could do is look at them, and then they'll accuse you of, wanting them. Anyway, so I made sure I wasn't looking at them, kept my eyes like to the ground or to the side. And then just as I walked past them, the first guy turned around, and I could see this because as they walked by, I'm looking to make sure they're not going to try and grab me. And that's what he tried to do, so he reached out to grab me, and I just leaned forward and started running, and ran hard and fast. But basically they were looking for somebody to beat up. They had been drinking, and now they wanted to have some fun. And so, I mean, I didn't say anything to them, I didn't even look at them, but I guess they were downtown looking to, quote, have some fun and beat up a fag.
I think that there's more openness about alternate lifestyles.
Many years ago, it was horrible. It was something that people didn't talk about. I think sex in general and sexual orientations, it was just a taboo subject.
How they know I was a fag? I didn't have a big sign on that said fag or anything, but if you're living in the West End, that's where people go to look for trouble. So that's about, I don't know, 15, 17 years ago, and that was just my personal experience.
There's a lot more information about that in the media, in schools, etc. So I think all of that education tends to decrease homophobia. So I'm suspecting that it has decreased from a few decades ago.
Here at Thompson, and I live downtown. I've lived a lot of places since, but recently moved back downtown. Still people get beat up downtown. Mm-hmm. It's usually late teens, early 20-year-olds, males, that go down looking for somebody to beat up, and that's what makes the news.
This school, for example, the group chat, and particularly this year, student council, a lot of high-profile people have put their support behind the cause and popularized the idea of being gay and celebrated it so that it becomes more common. We speak about it in class frequently.
So that part hasn't changed. That's still happening. I think legally, gay people, lesbians, are given more rights by the courts and by our legislatures and things like that, and that's all good. But I think as far as people's attitudes, it hasn't changed a whole lot. It's changed, but it still exists, and there's still a long ways to go. Anyway, so there's a personal experience of how it hasn't changed. At Thompson, I came out here about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and the experience that I've had with students and staff has been very positive.
People being accepting of people that who are girls with masculine names or boys with feminine names. It's becoming much more acceptable, and it's a good thing. So yeah, the change has been absolutely dramatic.
And like, I'm proud of a lot of the young people, how they deal with it, and like even the grade 8s this year. I thought it might be hard for them, but like even the grade 8 boys who I thought would be a little bit scared off. Oh, my teacher's gay, you're not going to catch whatever it is he has. Not at all. I think most of the kids are pretty comfortable with it, and that's a good sign. Maybe it's education, maybe it's, it's like any kind of racism. If you know the person and realize that they're just people. There are things that make us different, but there are many things that make us the same. And I think when they get over that, knowledge, we're making some progress.